I'm Mike Baranek, president of the Iowa State Education Association, the largest union in Iowa. Educators are in the house, and this is going to be a fantastic morning. Joining us first this morning is Senator Amy Klobuchar. Elected in 2006, what a great Iowa welcome. Elected in 2006, Amy Klobuchar is the first woman representing Minnesota in the U.S. Senate. Senator Klobuchar has built a reputation for putting partnerships aside to help strengthen the economy and support families, workers, and businesses. In 2016, an analysis of Metal News Service ranked her first among all 100 senators in sponsoring or co-sponsoring bills that were enacted into law in the 114th Congress. Before serving, Senator Klobuchar was elected Hennepin County Attorney, the largest county in Minnesota, and she knows how to drive in the snow. Please join me again in welcoming Senator Amy Klobuchar.
Wow, thank you, and thank you for being here. So yes, one of the reporters sent a tweet this morning, and it said, I suppose Amy Klobuchar snowmobiled down. But actually, I drove down with our staff, and we got here at 2 a.m. just to see all of you. Minnesota actually started voting yesterday, so we had a vote rally, but I wanted to be here and see you. And I just knew you'd be here despite the snow because, as we know, to have strong public schools, you must have a strong ISEA. And that is exactly what you are. So I want to thank Mike, I want to thank Mary Jane, all of the great leaders in this room. And I want to thank you for your talent and dedication to the classroom. I also want to thank you for not just doing your work by the day, but also helping so many incredible candidates that are running for office. It is because of your work in that last election that Cindy and Abby went to the Congress and that we turned the House of Representatives back into the people's house. And I always tell people, if you think we can't win in the Midwest, or you think that strong unions and a strong union message can't win, I have 4 words for you. Former Governor Scott Walker. So, some of you know me since I am your senator next door. But you may not know all the details about me and my strong union background. So unions made my family's story possible. Unions are why I'm standing up here today. My grandpa was an iron ore miner, and before that he was a Teamster. And he had to quit school without even graduating from high school because his parents were sick. He was the oldest of 9 kids, and oldest boy, and he had to help raise his brothers and sisters. And he had wanted to be in the Navy, but instead he took that job pulling a wagon and then in the mines. And every day he would go down in this cage with his lunch bucket that my grandma would pack 1,500 feet underground. The mines were really dangerous back then. My dad actually still remembers the caskets in the church because so many miners would die, and the whistle would go off, and people would run, and they wouldn't know who died. Was it their brother? Was it their son? Was it their husband? And guess what happened? Unions happened. And that made those mines safe. And that was what made the lives better in northern Minnesota. So then, he saved money in a coffee can in the basement along with my grandma to send my dad to a community college. My dad graduates, he becomes a newspaper man and a member of the Newspaper Guild Union. My mom, and here's the best story of all, she grows up in Milwaukee. She wants to be a teacher. She moves to Minnesota because they had strong teachers' unions. She ends up teaching second grade until she is 70 years old. Now that story is a little more interesting than it sounds because you see my parents got divorced and somehow my parents had put all of her teachers' pension money into adding a porch onto our back house. And so can you imagine what I heard growing up after they got divorced? Well, I've got to teach till I'm 70 years old because we put that money into that back porch. I hope you like sitting out on that back porch, she would say. But she loved teaching. And my favorite story about my mom was actually when she died, the story I heard. She taught that second grade class, and she loved teaching the monarch butterfly unit. And she would dress up as a monarch butterfly with a tunic and antennas and tights when she released the butterfly in front of these adoring second graders with a sign that said, "To Mexico or bust." And she always told me that she went grocery shopping afterward at a store she didn't normally go to. I never knew why until she died. Mother comes up with her son, older son, very disabled, and she says to me, "This is my son." And the mother is just sobbing. I cannot figure out what's going on. The boy's smiling, and she says, "This is my son, and your mom was his second grade teacher, and she was his favorite teacher. And he loved that monarch butterfly unit." And years later, when he graduated from high school, he got a job bagging groceries at this one store. And every year when your mom taught the unit, she would wear that outfit, she would go to his store, she would stand in his line and give him a big hug. That is what schools are about. That is what your work is about, whether you are a teacher, whether you work in the cafeteria, whether you drive a bus. That's what our school system is about. It's about looking out for our kids. So I stand here before you today as a granddaughter of a union member, the daughter of a teacher and a union member, the daughter of a newspaperman and a union member, and a candidate for president of the United States. That is what shared dreams are about. And I would not be here without the power of unions and the power of education. And I will tell you, I am a proud product of the public schools. I went to actually suburban schools, high school, middle school, down to elementary. I remember every single name of every single teacher I had from K through 6. You can ask me later. Because I loved each of them so much. Our daughter went to public schools. She was actually in a very urban public school. She had a school that was over 90% free and reduced lunch for a number of years. She went to school predominantly in that school with Somali immigrants and with Hmong immigrant kids. And I think it has made her this incredible adult that she is. Those experiences in the public schools. But I also got to see the importance of our nutrition programs. I also got to see the challenges. I got to see what went on after school when some kids were trying to just get something out of the vending machines to bring home. I got to see what was going on in the lunchroom. And I got to see what our school personnel, the love that they showed every day when they were dealing not just with being a teacher, not just with working in the cafeteria or being a counselor. They were literally the guide for those kids. They were their heart and soul while they had them in that school. So my plan, based on this, you can see it comes from my head, but also from my heart. My plan is, first of all, in my first 100 days, I have 137 things that I found out you can do without Congress, a president can do herself, that are legal. But I will tell you this, in the first 100 seconds, I will fire Betsy DeVos. I will put in place a Secretary of Education who comes from a teaching background, who understands the challenges our teachers space, and I will get a whole bunch of stuff done in just those first 100 days, because I think it is so important that we make education a priority. Secondly, major issue for me, teacher pay, and pay for our public school employees. From 1996 to 2017, the average weekly wages of public school teachers adjusted for inflation, pretty good speech, huh? Actually declined. That is not good. On average, teachers receive about 11% less in compensation than their counterparts in other professions. And I want to thank the ISEA for leading the way. Two big ways I'm going to increase teacher pay. One is directly with federal money, and we can do this, and I have a way to pay for it. And the other is with something called Progress Partnerships, which will be matching funds with states to really put pressure on the states. Boy, do you need pressure on this state to put more money in. So I think you do it both ways, and you get a major investment to get the pay up where it should be. Secondly, infrastructure. That's going to be an important part for me. I was the first candidate in the race to come out with an infrastructure plan that includes school infrastructure. I think that's a very, very important part of what we need to do. The next thing is closing the opportunity gap. We have the same issue in Minnesota in a big way like you have in Iowa. The color of your skin shouldn't determine the quality of your education. And so much of that is going to mean recruiting teachers of color, right? There's been study after study that show that students of color do better when you have teachers of color that are in the schools. And I can't stress how important that is. Next, IDEA grants. IDEA grants for kids with disabilities. I think we all know what's going on there. Federal mandate in place, good idea, but then they left the money behind, as so much happens so often. I am committed to fully funding IDEA. Next thing, mental health, and I've really been struck by this issue in Iowa. I was in Wapello and had a meeting, just general meeting with people in the area, and this woman came to it. She was a little late. She said, you know, I'm a school counselor, and I just got off work, and it's a school of about 650 kids. And she said, just today, 4 kids came to me to talk to me about thoughts of suicide. 4 kids in a school of 650. And she said they were all immigrant kids. They were all kids whose parents worked at a plant who were afraid that the Trump administration was going to deport their parents and deport them, and that their lives would never be the same. That is a story of course, a mean-spirited policy that has not worked for our economy. Let's start with that, which I will change immediately. But that is also a story of the need for mental health services. Not everyone in this room is qualified to be a psychiatrist or a psychologist. Yet, so many of you are on the front line having to do that work. So that means to me, getting the money out there for counselors, getting the money out there. You only have 64 public mental health beds in the state of Iowa. That is outrageous. That's why in so many of your rural areas, you see people waiting to get the kind of help that they need. So I came out fast with this policy, addiction and mental health. Part of this is my dad, when I was growing up, struggled with alcoholism. By the time my husband and I got married, he had 3 DWIs. That back then, the judge said, okay, you got a choice, jail or treatment. And he chose treatment. And in his words, he was pursued by grace. It changed his life. His treatment, his faith, his family, his friends got him through that. And I'm happy to say at age 91, he is now still sober. And that would not have happened without that. So I think for both mental health and for addiction, we should have the money out there for treatment. Last thing that I would mention is making sure that our kids are ready for the jobs of tomorrow. There's innovative things going on in the Iowa schools right now. I said on the debate stage the other day, sometimes I think we're not thinking big enough when we talk about education. We need to look at our economy and what are the jobs that our kids can take now and in the future. If we need 1 million home health care workers, which we do, then we better make sure that they get paid well enough. If we need more nursing assistants, things like that, well, then we have to make sure that we're encouraging people to get those degrees. As I noted, we are not going to have a shortage of MBAs in our country. We're going to have a shortage of plumbers. So making sure that we're working with our economy in that way. Finally, I'll mention the need to make sure we have strong unions. I am a big supporter of standing up for collective bargaining rights for public sector employees. And I support passing a federal law, Senator Hirono's, my friend Maisie's, Public Service Freedom to Negotiate Act. And as president, I will get it done. So, let us end with this. Right now, we know we don't just need to eke by a victory in the presidential race, because if we do that at 4 a.m., I can tell you that state that ekes us by will not be Iowa. And I want to win these congressional races here, and I want to win the U.S. Senate race here. Because if we want to get all these things done, we've got to send Mitch McConnell packing. And the way we do that is with a candidate at the top of the ticket that brings people with her instead of shutting them out. You know my track record. I have won every race, every place, every time. I have won in suburban districts. I have won in the reddest rural districts. I've run with a huge, high voter turnout, biggest in the country, in our urban districts and in our state. And that is what we need to win nationally. So remember, this is an election for our kids. This is an election for our economy, but it is also something else, and you know this as educators. It is a decency check. It is a values check. It is a patriotism check. It is having a president where if you want to teach about the presidency and you want your kids to listen to a president's address, that you don't have to turn down the volume and mute it, okay? Because right now, so many parents don't know what that guy's going to say at his next rally. So I ask for your support. My time had expired, and we know how subtle you are about this. When you're teachers, you know, you don't want to violate the rules. When the class is over, the bell rings, and it is over. Thank you, everyone.
So, Senator, you understand that everyone in this room knows that they have a responsibility to make sure that democracy endures in this country. And one of the things that we're doing this year is honoring the 19th Amendment and the hard work and activism and advocacy of women and how they fought to make sure that they had a voice in our country. So we just want to say thank you for coming to Iowa.
Thank you.
Good luck.
Thank you. Thank you, guys. This is so good. Oh, my. Thank you. It was worth all the snow to come here. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. That was wonderful. Thank you, Senator Klobuchar. Joining us next is Senator Elizabeth Warren. Senator Warren is a former educator, and in 2012, she became the first woman from Massachusetts to be elected to the U.S. Senate. I see a theme here. She was formerly a law school professor specializing in bankruptcy law. Because of her expertise and advocacy, in 2010, President Obama appointed her assistant to the president and special advisor to the Secretary of Treasury on the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, where she advocated for working Americans and the middle class. Please join me with an Iowa welcome, bringing Senator Elizabeth Warren to the stage. Thank you for coming. God love you.
Thank you. Hello, Iowa educators. Hello. It's good to see you this morning. Boy, that weather out there, it's a reminder, Iowa educators are tough, right? A hearty band. It is so good to see all of you this morning. Mike, thank you for the introduction. You know, I'm going to fill in just a little bit and just tell you a little bit more. I grew up in a family. My daddy had a lot of different jobs. He sold paint, he sold carpet, he sold fencing. He ended up as a janitor. My mom worked a minimum wage job at Sears. I have 3 older brothers who all went off and joined the military. Their chance to serve, and also their ticket to America's middle class. I have known what I wanted to be since 2nd grade. I wanted to be a public school teacher. Can we hear it for our public school teachers one more time? When Mrs. Lee gathered me up in her arms about halfway through 2nd grade and whispered in my ear, "You know, Miss Betsy, you too could be a teacher." My whole life changed. And it is the reminder of what school teachers, educators do every single day. They reach that one child out there and change their lives forever. So thank you to Mrs. Lee, and thank you to every public educator in America. You're changing our future. So here I am, of all the amazing, I could tell a long story about how I went from being a special education teacher, ultimately to a law professor, then to a senator, and now candidate for President of the United States. Yes, what an amazing story. But here's the thing. I think of the job of the President of the United States is to set the course for how we build a stronger future for this country. And it's got a lot of parts to it that we have to think about national defense, about climate change, how we think about our future. But for me, a huge and central part of this is we build a strong future when we invest in the education of every single one of our children. Every single one of them. So I think about the things that you could do as President of the United States. In fact, I love saying this. I think about the things that a president could do all by herself. Woohoo! And here's the first one. I make a promise, and that is the next Secretary of Education, my Secretary of Education, will be someone who has taught in public school. Betsy DeVos need not apply. But I do believe this is important. We need somebody at the Department of Education who believes in public education. And let me say a second part to that I think is important, and that is public schools, period. We have no business sending this money off to for-profit charters. This is outrageous. The public should support public schools, and that means the money stays in our public schools, every bit of it. But you know, for me, a big part of this is to think about how we fund public schools. You got to look at where we're doing it right now. And one of the consequences of what we do right now, by relying so heavily on property taxes, is that we just perpetuate discrimination. So, poor neighborhoods end up with less money for their schools. Years of housing discrimination based on race has implications then for generations of children who can't get the same funding for their schools. I believe it is time in America to say the funding of our schools, the support of our schools, is no longer just an obligation of local government and state government. It is a national obligation, a national emergency. And I got a plan for that. So here's my plan. Here's my plan to fundamentally change how we think about funding public education and, as a consequence, to fundamentally change what we can do in public education. Mine starts with, it is time in America for a wealth tax. This is pretty straightforward. This is your first $50 million in assets, free and clear, right? But on your 50 millionth and first dollar, you got to pitch in 2 cents. And 2 cents on every dollar after that. When you hit $1 billion in assets, you got to pitch in a few pennies more. That's all this is about. It's like a property tax, only it's national, and it's not just real estate. For this top 1/10 of 1%, it also includes their stock portfolio, the diamonds, the Rembrandt, and the yacht, right? That's the basic idea. So here's the part I want you to hear. What can we do with 2 cents? And the answer is we can invest in an entire generation. We can invest in the education of every single young person in this country. So here's where I start. An $800 billion investment of new federal dollars on top of the state dollars and local dollars in public K through 12 in America. Think what that would mean. It would let us quadruple the funding for Title I schools. I mean, put real money into our Title I schools. It would let us set aside $50 billion for upgrading all of our physical facilities. No more ceiling tiles that are falling down and leaky pipes and heat that doesn't work. All of our buildings should be first-rate buildings. And you know how a special education teacher approaches this. This would be full funding for the first time in history for IDEA, so every child with a disability gets the education they need. Think about that. We can do all of that for K-12 plus. I've done the math on this. You wouldn't be surprised. We can build an excellence fund that would let us give a grant to every single public school in America of $1 million for that public school to do what it needs to do to raise its excellence standards. Think about that. $800 billion, and the way it's set up is to encourage the states and localities to make additional investments in their public schools. We want to build a strong future. We need to do it by investing in public schools. In addition to that, that 2 cent wealth tax not only lets us do that for public schools, it also lets us provide universal early childhood education. Every baby in this country age 0 to 5. Daycare, the whole business. Universal pre-K for every 3-year-old and 4-year-old in America. And we can stop exploiting the people who do this work. It lets us raise the wages of every child care worker and preschool teacher in America. 2 cents. We can do all of that for our babies. We can do all of that for K-12 plus. We can provide tuition-free technical school, 2-year college, 4-year public college for anybody who wants an education. We can also help level the playing field in another way at the college level. We can invest $50 billion in our historically black colleges and universities and minority-serving institutions. These are places that disproportionately educate tomorrow's teachers, and we can give them a boost. We can do all of that on a 2 cent wealth tax, plus, and this is something that I know matters to a lot of teachers, we can cancel student loan debt for 43 million Americans. This is the centerpiece of what I want to see us do as a country. Like I said, there are differences I can make as president on who is the Secretary of Education, on where we spend the federal dollars that are already committed, but we can make a bigger change than that. We can make a statement as a nation about how we build a future. For me, this is about money. You bet it is. It's about budgets. I'm that kind of nerd, right? I watch this stuff. But this is about respect, and this is about reminding ourselves and our entire nation that the way we build a future is that we invest in every single one of our children. We invest in them with our dollars and with our hearts. It is an honor to fight alongside you in this battle. This is how we will build an America that works for everyone. Thank you for having me here. Thank you. We're gonna do this.
Senator Warren, as you know, we have a room full of folks who fully believe in democracy, and I know deep in your heart you believe in democracy as well. And the Iowa State Education Association this year is celebrating the ratification of the 19th Amendment.
Yes. We're in favor of that.
And so we just want to say thank you for coming to Iowa, and keep up the good fight and continue to fight for women.
Good. And let's find a good way to celebrate the 19th Amendment.
Absolutely.
Come November 2020.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Just waiting for my signal. Isn't this great, folks? Isn't this wonderful? It's amazing. And are they talking about public education? They certainly are. Are they supporting our kids? They are. I think this is proving to be a very good day for us here in the state and for the Iowa State Education Association. I'm just waiting to see the signal for the Vice President. And so I'll just give you a few minutes just to kind of talk to yourself until I see that we're ready to go. This might be a good time for you to go ahead and post some of those photos that you've been taking on Facebook. You might want to check Iowa DOT to see what the roads are like. I hear there are comments on the live stream, so you could be checking out that as well. I might even look at my own cell phone while I'm up here. Two minutes, I guess he's in the building, and it'll be 2 minutes before he walks through that door. You know, what else would be, this is an opportune time for you to do, is to go to educationvotes.org or Strong Public Schools and check out the comparisons between the speakers, the two that we've had and the two that are coming. Don't play the videos, but you can go to that site, click on the top where it says presidential or 2020 presidential, pull down the menu bar, click on either one of the options that you have there. But I have taken the time to explore that website, and it is very, very interesting. And I think the folks that they've interviewed have provided very good answers to our questions. You know what else I'd like to have us do? You know what? The men and women who've been traveling with the campaigns that are in the media have sacrificed a lot of their own lives. And so I think that we need to give them some applause to say thank you for coming here to Iowa. And to thank them for committing themselves to spreading the truth. All righty, folks. Next to join us is Vice President Joe Biden. He was elected the 47th U.S. Vice President, serving 2 full terms. Come on up, Joe. Serving 2 full terms with President Barack Obama. In 2008. In 2017, at the close of the administration, Obama presented Vice President Biden with the Presidential Medal of Freedom. When he was first elected to the U.S. Senate in 1972, Vice President Biden became the 5th youngest U.S. senator in history, as well as Delaware's longest-serving senator, serving from 1973 to 2009. It is with great honor that the public education teachers and support personnel of Iowa welcome you to our forum, and thank you for being here.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. This is more like the Iowa weather I'm used to. I'm Jill Biden's husband, Joe, and her flight is canceled in Pennsylvania. She's not here, so I know that many of you, particularly Tammy, is very upset she's not here. But please bear with me. I'll try my best without her. Folks, it's a great honor to be with you today, and the fact is that you have a lot of folks you've already heard from, and you're going to hear a lot more. But if Jill were here, I'd have the privilege of being around my wife, but I've been around educators my whole life. My deceased wife was an educator. I taught myself for a number of years when I taught law school when I was a United States Senator. Drove a school bus to get myself through law school, and even substitute taught for a while. And, these glimpses help me know you have to grapple with what you have to grapple with. A child brings every problem they have to school, everything, their hopes, their dreams. And it's not just their talents and their aspirations, but their fears and their anxieties. And you have to deal with them all. And you play an incredibly vital role in how they're going to make it, if they're going to make it. And it requires a considerable amount of empathy and understanding on your part. And I might add an awful lot of patience, and I would argue love. And sometimes the most critical part of your job is the most subtle part of the job. It matters. It matters that the janitor can observe what's going on in the hallway and make sure that things stay safe and kids aren't being bullied. It matters the cafeteria worker who notices as a student is just not looking well, or not either so hungry or ravenous or not prepared to eat at all. And it matters that the bus driver, I remember I drove a bus in Auburn, New York, and I remember one kid I'd drop off on a rural road, and the parent was never around, and we had to figure out what was going on because the kid was only in 8th grade, and where was it who was home, what was going on. And you know the passion it takes to do all of these jobs. I don't think the public fully understands it. And even after your long hours and the frustration you may feel in the classroom, you even feel worse when you know you're not supported or you're not accorded the respect, just a simple respect you deserve for what you do. And you know what matters and how much you're investing in the potential of a child. I've observed the teachers I know and a lot of our friends, our personal friends we've hung around with our whole life as well, are teachers, and that you feel their anguish and you feel their struggle, and you share their pride when they succeed. But the level of commitment that you all show is rare in any profession. I mean, it really is rare in any profession. And it's an embarrassment and it's a shame when it goes unrecognized, unrewarded, and not understood. We've seen the courage of all of you and educators across the country, from Chicago to here, to Kentucky, to other places where you've had to stand up and fight for your students by organizing walkouts. And I don't know any educator who wants to go on strike. I've not met one who wants to go on strike. Because, I found that for most of you, your job is your passion. You didn't become teachers for the money. You all know that. But think about it. I think you underestimate yourselves a lot of times. I really do. I know it's part of who you are, but I think you underestimate yourself and that how different you are in terms of your commitment to what you do. The closest profession I know to you all are nurses, quite frankly. And when you have to walk out, you'd much rather be in the classroom with your students because, but these walkouts are vital, not just to make sure you get paid fairly or you get health care or your school safety, although they're essential. Many times you're walking out to make sure students have greater resources, that they have the right books, that they have the right classrooms, that they have internet, that they have the things that are going to allow them to succeed. in ways that you know, but most people don't figure out. And all these things that become possible for our country when our children are given an even chance. And as Jill says all the time, any country that out-educates us is going to out-compete us. Any country that out-educates us is going to out-compete us. You know, the children you work with, and this is not hyperbole, are the most valuable resource the nation has. And I know we say that, and we say it all the time. It's like things we do. But really and truly, I mean, we say it, but I wonder how many people fully think about it and feel it. I mean, it literally is whether or not we're going to succeed as a nation. And I don't know, I always find it difficult, especially some of our wealthier friends who live in wealthy districts, why they don't understand. It's overwhelmingly their interest that the kids in the Title I schools do well. Overwhelming their interest. No, I really mean it. Think about it. It's sort of counterintuitive almost. And so, look, you know, education is the key to everything. And again, that's not hyperbole. It's the key to everything that's going to happen in this country, right here in the United States. America depends on you. It depends on you in ways that no one is prepared to really recognize. It's, that's why I believe it's critical that anyone running for president is clear with you about what they're planning on doing, what their plan is to deal with making sure that education and educators are rewarded. And I'm going to lay out for you very briefly, 8 minutes and 9 seconds, that a clear plan for education, and equally important because it depends on what you're going to be able to do, on protecting unions. You know, so here's the commitment Jill and I are making to every educator, every professional, and every school across the country. First and foremost, if I'm elected, I promise you, you're never going to have a better partner in the White House than Jill and Joe Biden, and that's God's truth. I give you my word to that. We're going to fight hammer and tongs that you're treated, first of all, with dignity, the dignity you deserve. I mean, really think about it, how it's just so critical to every other walk of. Why do we understand it in every other endeavor in life and not understand why it matters so much to educators? We're going to start by tripling funding for Title I schools, education and equity. And by the way, that's not a hard lift. That's from $15 to $45 billion a year. They give away more to racehorses than they do, you know. Anyway, look, education and equity is compounding our problem as well. It holds back our children, it holds back educators, and it holds back our communities from fulfilling the unlimited potential these kids have. We need to deal with the $23 billion gap between schools with, between majority white schools and non-white districts. And we're never going to have true equity in America until the quality of education doesn't depend on your zip code. This goes against every single instinct of what constitutes being an American. Governors Branstad and Reynolds, God love their souls, have cut education budgets by making it much harder for the next generation to realize their potential. I mean, I remember the Iowa test. I remember when you were #1 in the country. I remember then. What's happened? Look, that's not how we're going to grow our country. You know, these are not somebody else's children. They're our children. They're the kite strings that lift our national ambitions aloft. I mean, in a literal sense. These are all of our children. The country depends on it. And folks, we need to invest in them. We need to invest more at a state level and at a federal level. School districts have to use the additional monies that I'm talking about here, first and foremost, to raise teacher salaries. And because you start off making 23% less than any other college graduate does on the day one when you start. And American educators deserve a generous raise, and I'm going to make sure you get one. Secondly, we're going to get you the resources you need in school. You know, right now we're 110,000 teachers short in America. By 2025, we will be double that. There'll be 220,000 teachers short in America. That's nothing but trouble. And solving it was going to require not just raises and respect, but also resources, too. We're going to double the resources in school for school psychologists, school counselors, school nurses, social workers. And it's lost past time for us to fully fund the IDEA. Long past time. I really mean it. I guarantee I'm going to do that. I guarantee I'm going to do that. We're also going to invest in community schools where social workers can help ensure the students and parents have needs are met. And mental health, I'm sorry to go so rapidly, but I don't want the floor to fall out from under me here. Anyway, mental health is especially critical and too often overlooked. When trained professionals are helping care for students' mental health and behavioral needs, it frees up educators to deal with the things you're supposed to do: teaching, teaching, teaching. We're also going to upgrade school infrastructure to make sure that drinking water is safe, science labs are up to date, schools are hubs of innovation, cutting-edge learning, and there's high-speed internet in every single school in America. Thirdly, we're going to start investing in our children from birth all the way through high school. Not just some children, but every single child. And that matters because the way to get there is universal pre-K for everybody. Everybody. It's also going to ensure that every student has an opportunity to graduate from high school, or to graduate from school with some college credits already in their pocket, or industrial credits. That's going to lead to good paying jobs. And fourthly, we're going to stand strong. We're going to stand strong for your ironclad right to organize and bargain. Republicans and I have undermined collective bargaining system that have been working so well here for over 40 years. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. What do they think they're fixing? ISEA has done a great job on fighting back, and you shouldn't have to be in that position. You should have leaders at every level who will fight for you. And I promise you, look at my record, I promise you I will. And fifth, the most important, we're going to have someone in the White House you can trust, someone you can depend on, and fight for educators and fight for unions, because that's what I've been doing my entire life, and if I didn't do it, I'll be sleeping in the Lincoln bedroom. You all think I'm kidding, I'm not. And because 4 years of Betsy DeVos is enough. Is enough, is enough, is enough. I guarantee you the next Secretary of Education will have been a public school teacher. They will have taught in school. And we're going to invest in leadership skills and education learning and pay teachers who help educate teachers. And we're going to help educators wipe out the burden of student debt. You are doing a public good. You should have it written off. And I don't have time to explain it, but we do. And we're going to get serious about the tragedy of gun violence. I've beaten the NRA twice. The only one that's beaten them nationally twice. Talk about moral depravity. Our kids go to school. You send them off to school this September, and they learn how to duck and cover. My God. I really think about it. What is the matter with us? Folks, look, it doesn't matter. None of this matters unless we beat Donald Trump. And I'm going to beat Donald Trump if I'm your nominee. But I'm going to do one more thing. I'm going to bring along senators and House members and people up and down the line, because we need to have it all the way across our state legislatures. Well, we can't do this. And folks, when that happens, we're going to provide you with the support you need, and equally important, the respect you deserve. And together, we're going to ensure that every child, regardless of their family income, their ethnicity, or disability, is prepared for tomorrow's economy. I am absolutely confident we can get there. When America set its mind to something, it has never, 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 never failed to get it done. And ladies and gentlemen, so I want to thank you for everything you do. I want to thank you for everything you give. I want to thank you for all you do for our students. From the bottom of my heart, I mean it. Think about it again. Don't let anybody tell you anything other than this. You are the single most consequential cog in the wheel to see to it that we own the 21st century. God love you all, and may God protect our troops. And I got 33 seconds left. Thank you very, very much. I love you. Thanks.
Hey, don't trip on that cord.
Yeah.
Vice President Biden, you, through your dedication over the years, have certainly demonstrated to all of us in our country your understanding of the importance of democracy. And we here in Iowa are working this year to celebrate the 19th Amendment and what that meant to half of our population here in the country, and we love ourselves some Dr. Jill. So we would like to present this to you and to Dr. Jill for coming to Iowa, and let's keep up the good fight. Thank you.
Now, she's going to think that you set her up here. My special gift I shouldn't say this, but I will. When I'm in trouble or when I really want to tell her how much I love her for real, it's a yellow rose I give her.
There you go.
A yellow rose. God's truth. So I'm not going to tell her you guys gave me this. I'm going to...
Thank you, Joe. Thanks for great job. So I just have to tell you a little funny. There's this cord that came out back here, and I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to kill the vice president because he's going to fall over on this cord. And so I'm like ready to run over and try to get it, but I wasn't prepared for that today. All righty, folks, we have our last speaker. So let's stand up and give Mayor Pete Buttigieg a great Iowa welcome. Mayor Pete served as the 32nd mayor of South Bend, Indiana from 2012 through this month. When he was elected, he became the second youngest mayor in South Bend history and the youngest mayor of a U.S. city with at least 100,000 residents. And he was only 29 years old. The Washington Post called him the most interesting mayor you have ever heard of, based on his youth, education, and military background. Before running for office, Mayor Pete worked on the political campaigns of Democrats Jill Long Thompson, Joe Donnelly, and John Kerry. He joined the Navy Reserve in 2009 and served in Afghanistan. And thank you for your service, Mayor. He is honorably discharged in 2017. Please join me in welcoming Mayor Pete Buttigieg. Thanks for coming. God love you.
Good morning. Well, I'm so thrilled to be here and so thankful. I am Pete Buttigieg. I come from about 6 hours. Which way's east? That way, maybe a little longer on a day like today. I'm a retired mayor, and I am a friend of public education and educators. Throughout the last year, from when we first turned up in Iowa, introducing ourselves on the strength of an exploratory committee with 4 people working out of an office about the size of this stage, with not much of a mailing list or money, all the way to this point, one of the most consistent and important things about our encounter with Iowans has been meeting educators who are so committed to your students and to your craft. And whether it's been the folks who stood up to ask questions in town halls, people we've met with ISEA, or even finding myself next to Chris Byrne on the DART bus on the way to the Iowa State Fair, talking about some of the problems with things like public funding for charter schools, I have found that education is on everybody's mind in Iowa, and rightly so, because it is one of the most important issues at stake in the 2020 election, and the people around the country know it. Now we got to get elected officials to respond. Just before I share in detail how I envision the future of K through 12 public education, let me back up and say a little bit about what has me running in the first place. And I want to invite you to form an image in your mind in as much detail as possible, because if you understand that image, you'll understand my campaign. And that is what it's going to be like the first time the sun comes up over Iowa and Donald Trump is no longer the President of the United States. And I'm running partly because it's so important to bring that day about. This is our only chance to do this, and we had better get it right. And every time my party has claimed the presidency successfully in the last 50 years, certain things have been true about the nominee. It's been somebody, I know there are a lot of history teachers in the room. It's been somebody who was new to national politics. It's been somebody who was focused on values. It's been somebody who was not viewed as a creature of Washington, either didn't work there or hadn't been there very long. And it's been somebody who was ushering in a new generation of leadership. So, that and Americans have a way of looking for the opposite of whatever we've just had in the White House. And I would like to argue that I have something to offer in this regard, too, as a matter of style. But I actually don't just raise the prospect of that day to remind us what we've got to do to bring it about. It's because this election, by definition, is about who's going to be the president on that day. Who's going to lead our country forward in the era that begins the moment the Trump era ends. And in order to get that right, it's going to require a president capable of unifying the American people, who will be even more divided than we are now, if you just think about it for a minute. And doing it in a way that actually rises to meet the biggest challenges that our country faces. To be able to take big, bold rise, an American majority ready to get that done. And I see that at stake in all of the values that we hold dear as Americans, from our love of country, but not the kind of love of country that is cartoonishly imitated in the chest thumping of a president who pardons war criminals and thinks that makes him pro-military. I mean the love of country that begins with the knowledge that our country is made of people, and you can't love a country if you hate half of the people in it. A country with deep moral traditions, some of them religious, that recognizes that when food is being cut from hungry children, or children being torn from their parents at the borders, that flies in the face of the idea of I was hungry and you fed me, and I was a stranger and you welcomed me. And we can lift up those values while also honoring the fundamental principle that in this country, our Constitution belongs to people of every religion and of no religion equally, and God does not belong to a political party. I think about a country whose values include valuing work, and yet we tax work at a higher rate than we tax some of the most profitable multinational corporations in the world. If we value work, let's show it by valuing workers. And that is why organized labor is so important, including organized education. I'm thinking about democracy. I know it is hard to look kids in the eye teaching them about our country as a democracy right now, when we have racial voter suppression, districts drawn to where politicians get to pick out their voters, and money in politics based on a Supreme Court decision that holds that corporations have the same political souls as you and I do. But the good news is, as every teacher knows, we've got a process for clearing that up called constitutional amendments, and if that's what it takes to deal with Citizens United, we shouldn't be afraid to use it. And I think a lot about the American value of freedom, because I think that can unite us. But we got to clear up that freedom isn't about cutting every rule and regulation and tax and program that we have. That doesn't make us free. To become free is to pay attention to the means to develop the institutions that can help make us free. Sometimes we do have to keep government out of the way in order to be free. That's why I'm such a big believer, for example, in keeping government out of the business of telling women what their reproductive health care choices ought to be. But every mayor knows that sometimes we step up in the public sector to deliver on freedom. You're not free if you don't have health care. That's why we got to make sure there's no such thing as an uninsured American. Part of how mayors earn their paychecks is in the knowledge that you're not free if there's not a well-paved, plowed road to get you from point A to point B. We step up in the public sector to deliver on freedom. And that is where you come in. Because freedom comes by way of education. The freedom to live a life of your choosing comes by way of being equipped by the tools that you make sure the next generation will have. That is why we as a country, we as a species, invented education. And that is why every student has a fundamental right to excellent, quality, and equitable public education that you're out there to deliver. So how do we deliver on that in the era after Donald Trump? Well, I'll tell you step one. That's one of the easier steps to take. Appoint a Secretary of Education who believes in public education and supports our educators. Step one. But it goes well beyond that. The promise we make in America is that every child will have access to that excellent education. And we know that's not the reality. Most places, if you've got an area where more students are in need, there is more funding going there. We're one of the few countries where so often the reverse is the case. And access to education is so often predicted by income or zip code. And student performance is often determined by their health and their nutrition, and yet teachers are expected to bear the responsibility for that too. This is a personal issue for me, not just because my life was shaped by education, but because I am the son of educators. And I married a classroom teacher who gives me an education about education every day. And so I have seen how devoted teachers are to their students because I've seen the late nights grading papers. I've seen the phone calls to parents. I've seen the ways that teachers have and educators have dipped into their own bank accounts in order to furnish and equip their classrooms, and now are being expected to be counselors, mental health professionals, test administrators, and, according to some, are supposed to snap into action and become highly trained armed guards. As if you don't have enough on your plate practicing the craft of being professional educators. So I'm offering a whole different approach that will actually allow teachers to be teachers, that will honor teachers a little more like we do our soldiers, and pay our teachers a little more like we do our doctors, recognizing that that will make this whole country better off. That starts at the beginning. We got to invest over $1 trillion in early education, in great K-12 schools, and wraparound services that support students to succeed. I mean, look at that early part. Child care in Iowa was $9,500 for an infant. Typical single parent would face 40% of their income going to child care costs. It doesn't make any sense. Almost a quarter of Iowans are living in what we would consider child care deserts without enough licensed facilities. That's why we've got to create over 1 million new child care jobs, ensure those workers make at least $15 an hour, and invest in providers to expand quality and access. So we've got to triple funding for Title I schools so that when they get into K-12, we have the resources that are needed. And I'm proposing we create an education access corps, bringing together the top programs for teacher education around the country, creating a certificate that can be used for teaching any Title I school in the country, and completely forgiving any college costs of teachers who commit to do that for 7 years or more. We've got to lift up this profession. And it is why we've got to have a conversation about innovation in education. I think we all believe in innovation. We all believe in keeping up and getting ready for the next steps. But that has to be done with educators, not to educators. And that's one of many reasons why for-profit charter schools have no place in the future of American education. It's why public charter schools need to have the same accountability and a level playing field as traditional public schools so that we can make sure that whatever is developed there works to the benefit of traditional public schools. Your success should not depend on whether you won a lottery. We should make it available to every single student in every single school. And we got to make sure we're supporting the unions that stand up for educators and staff, and as they do so, are standing up for teachers, but also for parents and for children. We got to make sure teachers reflect the diversity of our country. We know that students are more likely to succeed when they see more teachers who look like them. We got to invest in that and double the proportion of new teachers and new school leaders who are people of color. We can do that in the next 10 years, and we will be a better country when we do. We got to expand education in rural areas, investing in transportation to help with early learning access, and doing more to recruit, support, and retain special education teachers, especially in rural areas where their help is needed. We got to break the school-to-prison pipeline. And that begins with reinstating the Obama-era guidance to address disparities in how the students are disciplined. And we have got to expand mental health services in our schools. I'm meeting counselors who were already spread thin, are now being reduced to test administration, and meanwhile, we have issues coming down on teachers who haven't been equipped with what they need in order to handle the issues. Yes, we need to get mental health first aid to every teacher and educator, but also, what good does it do to be able to identify an issue if you don't have anywhere to refer a kid to? That's why we got to build up the whole system and not let kids fall through the cracks. And while I passionately believe in building STEM education for the future, a future that's going to be defined by more and more complex technology, let's recognize something else. That the more repeatable tasks are done by a machine, the more it matters to have problem solving, critical thinking, social and emotional learning. It's why arts and humanities education are not a luxury, they are a necessity. I noticed on your name badges the words of FDR, that education is the safeguard of democracy. Let our education policy reflect the knowledge that we are not only educating workers, we are educating citizens, we are educating parents, we are educating neighbors. That's why these things matter. And I know that you already understand that all too well. I have been counseled that this is a tight ship and time limits are to be strictly respected. So, in the remaining few seconds, I want to mention one other thing that might sound a little strange in this season of division and bleakness. I want to make the case for hope. I know, it went out of style in our politics. But I've been reflecting on the fact that they took the word hopeful, made it into a noun, and turned it into a synonym for candidate. We here, parading before you today, are described as the 2020 hopefuls. I think that's fitting because running for office is an act of hope. Organizing is an act of hope. So is caucusing, volunteering, and voting. And I know you are propelled by hope for a better future, to do what you do in schools every day and to do what we all must do to make this country better, beginning on that day that the sun comes up on a post-Donald Trump America. So I hope I can look to you to make that possible, and I will be supporting you every step of the way. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Mayor Pete, you said it in your speech, women's rights, amendments, and democracy. Those are the things that we're celebrating here in Iowa this year. We're kicking off our celebration of the 19th Amendment. And so we'd just like to say thank you for coming to Iowa and represent or give you a yellow rose.
Wonderful. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Do you want this?
That's okay.
Okay. Well, this couldn't have gone off better. This was fantastic. I know that I speak for all of us when I express our deep appreciation for everyone's time this morning. It demonstrates how important our profession is, how important our schools are, and most importantly, how important our students are. To these candidates who took the time to be here today, Now we're going to be moving on to our breakout session from 11 to noon. After that, you'll have a buffet lunch out front, and you can bring your food into the room. And I will be starting my presentation around 12:50 as soon as I see most people in your seats. So thank you for being such a great audience. Thank you for showing them so much respect, and I'll see you after the break.